I just found this piece of wood I had in my stash, and I'm going to paint it with some black chalk paint, and then I'm going to put some of that yellow on. We're going to give it a little bit of a textured chippy look also before we turn it into a sign. Now, all of my signs I sell locally. I'm very fortunate. But there's many ways that you can sell them. Facebook Marketplace, on Etsy, you can go to craft sales, or if you have a booth, these all sell really well. And you don't have to pay anything for the wood. All you have is the cost of your products to make them. You can have a higher profit and have more money in your pocket, and you can be really creative in the process. I designed this graphic, and I think it's going to work perfect on this piece of wood. And my montage reverse graphic transfer method. Now, I have a full tutorial on how you can size your graphics. I had to do this in 2 or 3 steps so I can get all the right sizes of the graphics to fit on this piece of wood, and it sized up and worked perfectly with this graphic. It's available in my Etsy store if you want to grab this one. If you're a tea lover, it's a must graphic. I'm going to use my hot glue gun and press that piece of wood in its spot, and then I'm going to go in and just tap it in with some of those little nails and paint the back so it looks nice and neat. Lots of tips and tricks and inspiration here, so if you find some salvage wood of your own, you can make some signs. I'm just taking some 80 grit sandpaper and I'm sanding this down because it had a really glossy finish on it, and I want my paint to be able to adhere to it. So taking it right down to the bare wood. I have some wood filler. I'm going to fill up those holes, let it dry, and then get painting. I'm making my signs, and I want them to have that distressed gold look. I always start with the base black. I find when I'm sanding it afterwards, that black peeks through, and it just gives it that aged look. But that's my preference. You don't have to do that step. Now, if you missed my video on how to DIY your own silicone molds, you have to go back and watch it after this video, because you can make your own molds, and you can incorporate it into so many different DIY projects. This is a mold that I use for the stamp, and I am going to incorporate this into my sign. Using some air dry clay, press it into the mold, and I'm just going to make sure the back is nice and flat, and then I'm going to peel it out, and I'm going to have this gorgeous air dry clay piece that I can put on my sign. I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and then set it aside and let it dry. Now, this is the next day. I used my Gorilla Glue to glue that clay embellishment on the top, and I'm just putting on a couple coats of my white homemade chalk paint, and taking in and just dry brushing around that mold with a little bit of that black chalk paint, and one last distressing around the outside. If you're a seamstress or love to sew, you're going to love this graphic. Same process, Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. As far as making signs, this is the most affordable way. You don't have to buy vinyl, you don't have to buy stencils. All you need is a little bit of Mod Podge paper and a printer. And you don't even need a laser jet printer. You can do this process with an inkjet printer also. And I have some videos comparing those 2 printers together so you can see the difference. I printed these graphics off on 2 or 3 different sheets, sizing them up the way that I wanted them to fit on the sign, and it is absolutely beautiful. I love it. I love this graphic. Again, it's available in my Etsy store. So I've taken that boring piece of pine, and this is what I've turned it into. So if you're looking for a way to make a little bit of extra spending money, making signs is the way to go, and they always sell really well.
Cool.
I found this cabinet in the
I love making signs. I just don't have the sign or space.
A couple shelves, and I had an idea what I wanted to do with it. A little dusty and a little dirty, and I'm going to clean it up and upcycle it into a beautiful cabinet.
Yes, I love upcycling. Upcycling is great.
I'm going to separate these spindles and this little top that I found off the back of an old chair, and put them
One
together.
man's garbage is another
I
man's
thought that would
garbage.
look really cute on top, and it's threading, so it's kind of a focal point on top of the cabinet. And the spindles, I'm going to cut down and make 4 legs for the base. This is a great way to make legs for any piece of furniture you have. If you have those spindles laying around, just cut them down to size and screw them into your project. I'm going to remove the back off of the cabinet because I have a fabulous idea in my head of what I would like to do with it. I'm going to wipe it all down, give it a little bit of a sand, and prep it for some homemade hot paint. is my homemade drop paint that I make. I have a really great recipe. I'll link below in the description. It adheres really well to any kind of shiny surface or veneer, so you don't have to do very much prep work, and it works fabulous. I'm going to remove the hinges and the knobs, and I always have paint everywhere. I'm going to remove the hinges and the knobs and get ready to paint the cabinet. And I'm going to give it a light sanding all over just to get rid of any crud because looks like it has been stored and it's quite dusty. I'm just using an 80 grit sanding block and just scuffing everything all up. I get so excited when I find pieces like this, especially in the dump when it's free, and I know that I can do something with it to make it pretty again. So this has been a fun project for me trying to figure out what I want it to do, but I'm excited for the outcome.
Totally love DUIs.
Okay, and I'm going to put a coat of the black chalk paint all over the cabinet. Anyone that's painted shutters before know these things are a bugger. Just takes patience and time. I'm going to put a coat of paint on the spindles that I painted the legs and a piece of the wooden chair top that I'm going to screw on the top of the cabinet. Everything has one full coat of the black chalk paint, all painted and ready for the next coat. Now everything's going to get a coat of the homemade white chalk paint. And everything's going to get a real
Why do I
good
always look so
sanding. I'm
shiny?
using a 80 grit sandpaper on my palm sander, and I'm going to scuff up everywhere where it would be used or would wear down if it was really old, and that's going to make it look like a really shiny chic piece.
That is so cool.
Now for the fun part, I'm going to decoupage the napkins onto the back of the cabinet. So I'm just going to, these are 3-ply napkins, so I'm going to take the back 2-ply off and just work with the 1 ply that has flower pattern and decoupage it with my Mod Podge. What I'm going to do next is I like to have a rough edge along the napkin when I put it down on the piece of wood, because it blends easier and it doesn't give you a straight line when you put the next napkin next to it. You can kind of blend the 2 pieces together
Social
and it
media
looks
in.
much more polished and finished.
You gotta advertise.
I just got these napkins at the dollar store here in Ontario, and I just love the flower print on them. I use them now on a couple projects, and I wish I had gotten a few more packages of them. Okay, now we're ready to Mod Podge the napkin on the piece of wood. So I'm just going to put a light coat on the board just to size up the napkin. You don't want it too thick because it'll bubble and wrinkle a lot, but just a nice thin coat for the napkin to adhere to it. And when I actually don't mind if there's going to be 2 wrinkles in it because that's kind of the look that I'm going for. But it's 28 years today, so the napkin's kind of going around a little bit. But you're just going to place it where you want it, and then just lightly just press it down. And then I like to take my paintbrush with just a little bit of Mod Podge on it and just adhere it down to the board a little bit better and push down all those little edges to make sure that they're sealed to the wood. After the napkins have completely dried, put a light coat of Mod Podge over the whole surface. You'll see some of the little wrinkles in it. I don't mind those. I'm going to give it a little sanding once it dries completely and make it look kind of rustful.
Okay.
Now I'm going to screw the top piece onto the cabinet, and I'm just going to screw it with 2 screws from underneath into the piece of wood. This is just a fabulous piece, and it was broken off of an old chair that I found in the dump, and I saved this because I knew I would use it for some project someday. And I got the spindle legs screwed into the base of the cabinet. I am loving this. I love the full print, and it's going to look so perfect on the back of the cabinet. When you open up the doors, you'll see this floral pattern and make it look really vintage. And I'm just going to nail the back back onto the cabinet with the little nails that I took out of it.
Wow, this thing is absurd. No, what can I do?
I've got it all nailed back down, and I'm going to put a coat of the black chalk paint on the back of it, just because it looks more professionally finished if you have the back painted, I think. And there you have the finished cabinet. Everything completely sourced from the dump. The chair back,
You see that
the
works.
cabinet with the old shutter door on it, and the spindles that I cut down for legs. My favorite is the back though, with the floral print. It just, I think, finishes the whole cabinet and makes it look amazing. I hope you've enjoyed today's Trash to Treasure makeover, and to see that it is possible to take something that was in the dump and make it beautiful again. The first thing I'm going to do is use a wire brush. I
I'm
picked
sorry,
this one
guys.
up
I'm
at the
just trying to
hardware
see if I can
store.
fix
You can
something.
also find them in Walmart, Home Depot, probably even the dollar store. And I'm going to take the wire brush along the grain of the wood. This will help make the grain of the wood stand out more when we put our layered colors on. And there's no fancy way of doing this. You want it to look rustic and you want it to look kind of chippy. So I just take the wire brush back and forth. You can go side to side, and you'll see that you'll get little bits of sawdust coming off from the wire brush, and the grains of the wood
I don't
will
know
be
why he's
standing
doing
out
that, but
more. Takes a little bit of elbow grease, but it's a good workout for your arms. You can also do this step with a wire brush on a drill, but I just found I didn't have as much control, and I like using the brush better. And you can see how it's starting to bring out the raised edges along that grain. Pellets are really easy to find, especially around here, and there's never any shortage of them, so I always can find lots to make signs or any little project that I want to do. And you can see the grain in this one, it's got a nice little swirl to it, and once we put the paint on it, it's really going to stand out. Okay, now we're ready to paint. I have some latex paint in a tester jar and some acrylic paint. And that's all you need to do this project. My first layer, I always like to use latex paint. You want the latex as the base because then when you do the next step, it will work better. So I'm just putting a liberal coat over the whole palette board. Make sure you get it in all the grooves and all the little nooks and crannies. If you use chalk paint or acrylic paint as the base, I find I didn't have quite as good of an effect in the end, so I always try to use the latex paint. Now it's completely dry, and I have an 80 grit sandpaper on my sander, and I'm going to be really aggressive and sand all those high parts of that wood right down so your board is flush. And then you're going to have two colors. You're going to have your bare wood, and you're going to have your latex paint, and that's what you want to do. Now you can maybe not sand it as much, but what we're going to do is we want to stain the wood on the top, so the more that you sand off, the more contrast you're going to have between the two colors. And it already looks fabulous just the way that it is right now, but wait until we do the second step.
Thank you.
And what I love about the palette wood is each piece is so different. They all have different grains and different saw marks in them, and it just gives your project that you're making so much more character. Okay, now to finish these off and just take them to the next level. I have mixed up my homemade stain with the acrylic paint. I have a tutorial on how to do it. I'll put a link up above here and down in the description. You can get the recipe for that. So you just need to make your homemade stain, have a little bit of paper towel and a sponge, and apply it all over that board. After you've applied it all over the board, you're going to let it sit for about 1 minute, let it soak into the wood, and then you're going to take your paper towel and wipe off all the excess stain. And as you're wiping away, the stain will not stick to the latex paint, but it'll stick to the raw wood, and that gives you your two tones of color. So you can see why if you're using a chalk paint or an acrylic paint, when you're doing this step, it would also soak into that paint. Where the latex paint, it lays on top and it doesn't soak in as well. So that's how you achieve the two different looks. And I know if you're a real crafter, we all have hordes and hordes of acrylic paint from the dollar store.
Yes,
so you can get so
crafter.
creative with different color combinations. And I just love the saw marks in this one. It has so much character. And if you've put on your first coat of stain and it's not quite as dark as you wanted it to, you can always go over the board and do a second layer until you get the desired color.
Do you knit?
And if you wanted to get really creative, you can sand down after
to
this
do it
step
for
and put a
real,
third
but
color
don't
on.
do it.
And I'm sure you'd have some wonderful effects with that. I love to use these palette boards to make them into signs, but I did something a little bit different today with these. So make sure you stick through to the end and I'll show you what I created with them. I love taking new wood and making it vintage and old and chippy, like it's been around for 100 years. I have all kinds of different painting techniques that you can check out after you've watched this one, where you can achieve different looks, but still make new wood look old. So make sure you check out those different videos after you watch this one. And now to finish them off, I'm going to take my sander and sand them up and give them a little bit more of a rustic look. So I'm using my Varathane polyacrylic sealer for the outdoors. If you're going to have your project inside, you don't have to use the outdoor one, but because it's going to be out in the elements, I want to give it that extra seal. So I'm just going to put 2 coats over each board to seal them up really well. And when you put the polyacrylic on it, it just brings that grain of that wood out even more. Okay, I got them all done. They're all dried and we're ready to make my project. And I'm so happy with the way that they turned out, and I love all the colors that I used. And this is what I'm going to use them with. I found these at a yard sale. I think I picked them up for a couple dollars. The tops were rotten. I took them off. I love the base. I'm not touching them. I love the color. I love the chippy rusty. And I'm going to make them into plant stands. I cut the pallet boards to size. 3 of them fit in perfect. So it was meant to be. What do you think? Do you like it? So next time you see a pallet, grab it, cut out some boards, and try this
Oh, I
technique.
have those plants.
Found these fabulous candle lanterns in the dump. They were dirty, they were really sun bleached, but they were still in really good shape.
man,
And
garbage
I
is
knew
another
I could
damn
put them
treasure.
up and make them beautiful again. I'm going to take the handle off the one lantern. It just has a jump ring, and I can just squeeze it apart and take it off. And I'm going to put some masking tape around that metal piece because I don't want it to get any spray paint on it. Taking it outside, and I'm just going to give it a light coat of white spray paint. I want to give it that sun-bleached white color. Obviously, somebody didn't see the potential that these lanterns still have because they turned out beautiful just with a real light coat of spray paint, and brought it back to life for free. The glass votive holder on the inside of the one lantern was still there, was not broken. I cleaned it up and put in a little tea light. And the other lantern, back in one of my older videos, I made some candles with a tuna tin can, and that's one of those, and it fit in there perfect. And look how gorgeous these are. Sun bleached kind of white look, much better than before, and they're ready to put out on my patio. Second project is this old lantern that I found in the scrap metal bin. It's really rusty, but it has so much character, and I want to preserve that rust. I don't want to paint it. So I'm taking my engine enamel, and I'm going to give it a really good coat and seal in all that gorgeous rust. I love using the engine enamel for this type of a project. It seals it up really well, so you can put it out in the elements, and you can find it at an automotive store, or you can also find it on Amazon. And I'll put the link down below in the description so you can check that out. The engine enamel that I bought has a bit of a gloss finish, and it just made that rust pop. I love it. In one of my previous videos, I did some tin can upcycles, and I made this tin can. I loved it and wasn't quite sure what to do with it. I know what to do with it today. I made a homemade napkin and decoupaged it on top of this tin can, and it fit in this lantern perfect. I added an ivy, and it is going to look gorgeous on my front porch. I've taken this rusty, dull-looking lantern and made it into a beautiful piece of outdoor home decor. And I think the choice to save that rust color was the perfect one. I found this old birdhouse, and it's definitely seen better days. The paint that was on it has completely disintegrated on it, and some of the nails were popped out, and it just needed some TLC, but it was still in good enough shape that I'm going to be able to fix it up. Just taking my hammer and just pushing in any of those nails that had started to pop out, and then I'm going to give it a really good sanding with an 80 grit sandpaper so it'll be ready to paint. I am loving this yellow paint. I love picking up these little testers too. It's just the right amount of paint for a couple projects. And I'm also loving this paintbrush from Zebra, the Palm Pro. It works fantastic to get in all those little nooks and crannies on your small projects. I love all of their paintbrushes, and they have different types for different projects. I'll put the link down below in the description, and you can head over to their website and check them out because it is a must for paintbrushes. I thought the blue was going to really complement the yellow, so I'm going to do a salt painting technique on the roof to give it a rustic kind of chippy look. I'm going to paint on the paint. This is just a regular latex paint sample that I bought at Home Depot, and I'm just painting it all over the roof. And then once I have that done, while the paint is still wet, I'm going to sprinkle on pickling salt. You can use any type of salt, but the pickling salt, I like the texture that it gives and the chippiness. It's just a nice coarse salt. And just sprinkle it right into that wet paint. everything's all dry, I'm taking it inside because it is messy, and I'm sanding it down with my 80 grit sandpaper. I think it turned out fantastic. I love the chippy feel, and I'm going to add some embellishments. I found this old door pull and this dresser drawer pull, and I'm going to add them onto the birdhouse just as some focal points. And that looks 100% better than that birdhouse that I found in the dump at the wood pile. I was able to upcycle it and make it pretty again, and it's ready for some renters.
It's so pretty.
Now, this is a whole bunch of things that I found put together. This
I love
wire basket
taking things and redoing things
wooden
over.
trivet. I'm not sure what it was
Making it
off of
better.
or where it was from.
Making
it's
it
really
different.
sturdy and
Making it stand
beautiful.
out.
I knew I wanted to use that in this project, and an old spindle off a table. I'm going to give the wire basket and the trivet a coat of black spray paint. I find sometimes when I find things, I just tuck them away, and it takes a while for me to get inspired and figure out what I want to do with them. And this is one of these projects. I have all three of these things tucked away, and it just all of a sudden came to me, and I put it together. I drilled a hole down the middle of the trivet, and I'm doing a little test hole in the bottom of the spindle, and I'm going to screw those two pieces together. I'm using these staple nails to put the basket on top of the spindle. It's a little tricky to get that hammer in and out of there, but I made it work, and I got it on there nice and sturdy. And I've created a beautiful planter with just junk.
Nice.
The wire basket, the spindle, and that trivet on the bottom, and it all pulled together beautifully. So that's why sometimes I can create these wonderful projects, because I don't throw anything out, because you never know when you're going to need it. Last project, we're going to upcycle this glass coffee jar and a solar light from the dollar store. I want to paint the glass jar, and the first step that I like to do when painting glass is to give it a light spray of primer, and then I have some of this accent stone spray paint. I wanted to give it a little bit of texture, and it works fantastic for that. I'm going to take the stake out of the bottom of the solar light, fill up that glass jar with some gravel from my driveway, get out my E6000, and put a little bit around the rim of that glass jar, and just set the solar light into it. The weight of the gravel in the glass jar keeps it from tipping over, and I added some twine around the neck of it for embellishment. And
Now that's a good
once the
idea.
sun goes down, the solar light will light up, and it will look beautiful. I hope you've enjoyed my dump find upcycles that I've turned into beautiful outdoor decor.
They're not done. They're awesome.
And I'm excited to show you guys how it's going to turn out. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to wash this down with some soapy water and then let it dry really well. And then we're going to put on our base coat. Before we get started, let's take off all of the hardware and all of the hinges.
She's great.
I'm going to do a really chippy finish.
She's very inspirational. She makes me want a house or somewhere I could do all that greatness. Find your tribe.
And for this project, I'm going to be using the square paintbrush from Zebra. These are
Zebra,
my favorite
Z-I-B-R-A.
paintbrushes, and they have so many to choose from for every different project. I'll put a link down below in the description so you can head to their website and check it out. I'm going to paint the entire cabinet, inside and out, with my homemade black truck paint. I certainly have been on a roll finding fantastic pieces in the dump at the wood pile, and I'm happy because I can upcycle them and share them with you. When I'm painting furniture, I always like to paint the back of the project also. I usually do it in the same color as the base coat, and I don't do any painting techniques or anything on it, but it just brings it all together nicely. The whole cabinet has one coat of that black homemade chalk paint over the entire piece. I'm going to do a couple of different techniques on this. I'm going to do the Vaseline method, and I'm going to do the airspray flapping technique. Both of these techniques will create an aged, authentic, vintage-looking finish on your furniture piece that you're doing. This is such an easy way to create chippy paint, just with some Vaseline. You apply it anywhere where that cabinet would have aged naturally, in the corners, around the legs, and you can put a lot on or a little on, depending on how chippy you want it. And then you just paint right over top of that Vaseline. I'm loving this yellow color. If you've been following along, you see that I practically am painting everything in this yellow color. I love it. When we're doing techniques like this and we want to create that chippy layered effect, you want to have 2 or 3 different colors. I had this turquoise paint that was given to me by a friend. She'd finished up with it. I grabbed it. I'm just going to just dab it here and there and let the yellow peek through in between and cover the whole cabinet. I know this going in there, I know it looks like an awful mess right now, but it's going to be beautiful when it's finished. So make sure you stick through to the end so you can see the end result. I'm also going to put some graphics on the front door that are going to be beautiful. And the next step is our hairspray technique. I love using this technique for creating just a fine crackle. This does not give the same kind of crackle as Elmer's glue. This is a little bit smaller, not as pronounced, and I think it just looks more authentic. So I've sprayed my whole piece with firm hairspray, and then I find it also works best if you're using acrylic paint. I didn't have any acrylic paint enough to do this project, so I'm using chalk paint. I'll get a little bit of crackling, but probably not as much as if I had used acrylic, but we're still going to get that aged vintage look. We're going to spray on the hairspray, let it dry, and then paint on top of it, and then take the heat gun and dry it, and the crackles will appear. With all of these painting techniques, I'm trying to replicate what an old piece of furniture looks like after it's been aged over 100 years, or that old sign and that crackled and layered paint look. And with all these techniques, a lot of them, I think I can get pretty close to making them look really authentic. Everything has been sprayed with hairspray, and then painted, and then completely dried, and then I just took a scraper and scraped all around the edges where that Vaseline was, and it just took it down to those other layers of color. Now, this is a little trick too, if you want to make it even look more authentic. I like using a stencil brush, dipping it in some water, and then scrubbing into that paint, and it'll take it down to the next layer, and you can do it as big or as small of an area as you want, and it'll expose that paint underneath, and just look at how fantastic that looks, and it looks natural.
Natural.
Cabinet is completely painted. I love the way that it turned out. Now we're going to put some graphics on the front door. I've got 2 graphics that I designed, and I'm going to put them together so I can have the graphic down the whole door panel. I've put them in my Word program, I've sized them and made sure they fit on the door, and I'm using my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. I have all kinds of full tutorials on my channel on how to do this step by step if you've never tried it before, but it's so versatile and it works fantastic. We're just applying the Mod Podge on each of the graphics, putting them down, making sure we've gotten all the bubbles and all the wrinkles out, and then we're going to set it aside and let it dry overnight. These graphics are available in my Etsy store. I put the link down below in the description so you can check it out. There's these graphics plus so many more. I've let these graphics sit overnight, and now I've just got a little dish of water with a little rag, and I'm just dampening that paper until you can just start to see the graphics show through, and then rubbing off the paper. This technique takes a little bit of practice, but once you get the hang of it, it's so much fun. Let's put some hardware on the door. It didn't have a handle, so I found this pole in my stash, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a patina. The turquoise paint that I used on the cabinet, I'm going to paint on the hardware and then wipe it off with a rag. You can also wipe it off with a baby wipe, and it will just stay on all of the little nooks and crannies, and it will give that patina look to the hardware. And once it's completely dry, I'm going to seal it all up with my engine enamel, and it'll make it really durable. And the cabinet is completely done, and I am in love with it. I think I was able to really replicate that chippy, layered, antique-looking wood, and
I would have
the
just invite
graphics on the
everybody to my
front
house and
turned
have
out
a
fabulous.
sale
Adding a
on
little
the
bit of a
signs,
patina look to
so
the
that way they can
hardware
make their way out my
just took it
house.
to the next level.
Because she
It's quite
says
a
she has so many of
transformation
them
from
all
that
around.
plain pine cabinet, had no character, to what I've created. So I'd love to know down in the comments what you think about my upcycle.
I think it's great. What do you guys think? Do you upcycle any of your stuff? I do, all the time.
It's a beautiful day here. The sun is shining, spring has come, and this is the first project on my to-do list. I saved this bench from the dump, and I'm excited to upcycle it. First of all, I love this paint color, and the chippiness and the way it is worn is fabulous. I don't want to change any of that. I want to keep all the paint that's there intact. I just want to freshen it up. It's not in perfect shape. It's really old, but the ornate legs on it and the sides of the bench are just fabulous. It needs a good cleaning, so I'm going to use some TSP and scrub it down and get all the little bits of dirt and loose paint off. This TSP is great. It'll remove any grease or grime or dirt. And I'm just going to use my scraper and just remove any loose bits of paint. It always amazes me what people just throw out because this bench had so much potential. Let
But
me know in the comments if you would have saved this from the landfill.
yes, I would have saved it.
Now I'm just going to use this stuff pad instead of sandpaper because I don't want to take any of the paint off. I just want to remove any loose bits that are still there, and this works really well because it's a very fine grit.
Sanding is so exhausting.
Sand it down and
Sanding, exhausting. You can get a sand roller.
So the stain will make everything all hot, and that's when we're next. I'll put a link down below in the description.
There's no link.
And a link up top here of how you can make your own DIY stain.
You can
can
just
make
do
it
it
into
yourself.
any color, and it's so cheap and affordable and easy. And I'm just going to apply the stain over the whole bench, even over the existing paint. And then it's just going to freshen up that wood and bring out the grain and make it pop more. And the nice thing about this stain is you can layer it. You can put one layer on if you think that it's not maybe quite dark enough. You can mix up a little bit more and put more on until you get the desired color that you like. And I think it looks really great. It's really freshened up this wood and it doesn't look so dried out and aged. After you've applied all the stain, you just take a rag and wipe off anywhere where it's still wet. And I thought this would look really cute with a nice quote on the front. I'm going to do my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer technique to put these words on the front of the bench. I have a full tutorial with step-by-step instructions on how to do this technique. I'll put a link down below in the description and up here in the corner. Okay, this is dried completely, and I'm just going to take a damp rag and rub off that paper, and you're going to have the words left on the bench. I love using this technique. It's a great way to update furniture or your upcycle projects or to make wooden signs. And I'm enjoying being out in the sun and enjoying the warm weather and being able to get outside and do some upcycle projects that I've had stored away for the winter in my shed. Okay, and the graphics are all done, and I love the way they look on the front of this bench. If you're interested in purchasing these graphics, they're in my Etsy store. I'll put a link down below and up above. And there it is, all finished, and I'm so glad I was able to save it from the landfill. Once I put that top coat of the Varathane on it, it just made that yellow pop, and it looks fantastic. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this upcycled bench. I'm loving it.
I think it's great. I don't like the rustic look. I would have done without it.
Today we're working on a dump farm. I found this
God,
little
you know,
table in the wood pile.
how many of those have we found in the
It's in
garbage?
kind of rough shape, but I know I can save it. It's just one of those cheap little tables, and it all comes apart. And I'm gonna do some of my one-step paint and some gift wrap paper decoupage on it. Kind of gonna do a funky spin on it, so I'm excited to show you guys what I have in mind. So we have lots of work. Let's get started. This table has definitely seen better days. A lot of the finish has come off and it's loose. It needs to be tightened up once it's finished, but I know I can make it into something a lot better. This is a type of side table that all the legs and the spindles unscrew, so it actually makes it easier for painting. I can take it all apart and then lay it all out and paint it properly. When you see these tables out and about, don't overlook them. They're really easy to make pretty again. I took my 220 sanding block and I sanded it all down to get it all nice and smooth. And then I had some holes all around the outside of it. I think it had a ledge on it at one point. Filled it up with some wood filler, let it dry, and then I sanded that down and then took a baby wipe and wiped everything down clean so we have a nice surface to start on. This is the gift wrap paper that I'm going to use. I picked it up at the dollar store and I had this paint in my stash. I'm going to turn it into one-step paint, but look how it matches that gift wrap. It's going to come together perfectly. I've mixed up my one-step paint. If you missed that video, I'll put the link down in the description where you can watch that and get the recipe from there. It basically eliminates any prep to your surface or any top coat. It's all in one. It works fantastic, and wow,
I love
is it
all in one
ever
except for
durable.
pancakes.
If you want to paint a piece of furniture or cabinet doors, this is a recipe to use because it is really hard to distress afterwards. It's so hard. So if you're just going to do a solid color, this works perfect. Now I'm going to get painting these spindles. I have a little trick for painting spindles and it really speeds up the process. Also have a full tutorial there. I'll put that link down below in the description if you want to see some really fun spindles that I painted in some fabulous colors. You can check that out after. Basically, you're just putting on a rubber glove and then one of those spare socks that you've had laying around for forever, bring them out into your crafting area and use them to paint spindles. Dip your hand in the paint with the sock and just rub it on the spindles.
Oh, I see.
These are probably going to take a couple coats. I'm going to let them dry completely before I add the next coat. Coming along perfect. I think they're still going to need one more coat.
Almost done with my first row.
And I've got 2 coats on these 2 shelves. They look great, but they're going to need one more coat also. I've got 2 full coats on these spindles. It's covered really well, but I think I want to do one more coat. And I'm going to sponge it on. I just have a little piece of sponge, and I'm just dipping it in the paint, and I'm just going to dab it up and down along that whole spindle, and it's going to give it a nice smooth finish. And I'm also going to use that same process on those 2 shelves. This has got 2 coats on it already. I let it completely dry, and now I'm going to put my 3rd coat on with a sponge. It's going to get rid of any brush lines or any imperfections that you've had when you were painting it if you just dab that sponge up and down. My spindles are drying. I love this red. It is so fun and so whimsical. And it's always nice every once in a while to kind of venture out of that white and black and do something with a splash of color. Now we're going to get the gift wrap, and we're going to cut a piece of it off the roll a little bit bigger than the top. We're going to Mod Podge it on with my matte finish, and you're just going to brush it on You don't want it too thick. If you have it thick, it's going to wrinkle up too much and bubble too much. You just want a thin coat, just enough to stick that wrapping paper onto the surface. One thing with decoupaging that you should always kind of keep in the back of your mind is you're never going to have a project that's 100% no wrinkles or no bubbles. It's virtually impossible. And I usually, when I'm doing projects like this, I embrace the wrinkles. I love it when they show up every once in a while because you can make it look distressed and old, and it doesn't look like it's just a hunk of paper stuck on the top of your surface.
Which is what it is, but it still looks nice.
Now I have added 2 coats of Mod Podge on top of that piece of wood. Let both of those coats dry completely. Now I'm going to take that gift wrap and place it exactly where I want on that piece of wood. The flowers, I kind of want to make sure they're centered up and they're going to look nice when it's finished. And I'm putting a piece of parchment paper on top. Make sure it's parchment paper, not wax paper.
Oh, parchment paper.
Then we're going to iron it on. I have my iron set on the highest setting with no steam. And you're just going to take your time and just slowly just iron on that gift wrap. And as you're doing that, Mod Podge underneath will melt and adhere the paper to your project. I really love using the iron-on method to decoupage. It works really well when you're using it on a bigger project too. And the nice thing about using gift wrap paper is it comes in a bigger roll, so you can decoupage a bigger project. You're not limited to just using a piece of paper. That ironed on really well. Now I'm going to take my sanding block. This is a 80 grit sanding block, and I'm just going to take it around the edges and just sand it. And as you do that, you're going to leave a really nice clean edge around your piece of wood. Now I'm going to take that sanding block across the top of that gift wrap paper. I just want to age it, kind of distress it so it doesn't look perfect. And as you can see, it did kind of wrinkle up quite a bit. I don't know if it was a different type of gift wrap paper, but I actually really like it. And as I'm sanding it, I'm liking it even more. It gives it a really distressed look. By sanding it, it knocks off that top edge of the wrinkles and leaves this beautiful distressed finish. I'm embracing the wrinkles on this one because I love the way that it turned out.
Embrace the wrinkles.
I'm going to seal this up with engine enamel. This table will probably be used for a plant stand or a little end table, and I want it to be sealed really well and really be durable. This engine enamel is perfect for that. We are ready to put this dump fine table back together. And I'm going to put a couple coats of paint on the bottoms of those shelves. Someone else's trash.
There's another man's
my treasure.
That's right.
I knew with a little bit of TLC and a little bit of patience, I could turn this into something beautiful again. And I love the bright color and the whimsical feel of it.
First row is done.
Ever wonder what to do with all your extra fabric scraps? Get ready for some awesome DIY ideas. I'm going to show you fun ways to use them in crafts and furniture upcycles, from decoupaging fabric onto furniture to image transfers. I've got lots of creative ideas. We have lots of work. Let's get started. Project that I'm going to upcycle and do fabric decoupage on the top of it. I actually found this on the side of the road, and it's structurally really good. The colors are really funky, but we're going to make it pretty again. And for this project, I'm going to be using the Chiseled Wedge by Zebra. I love their paintbrushes, and this one's perfect for this project. I'm going to paint this whole end table with 2 coats of paint chalk paint that I had left over from another project. And then when it's completely dry, I'm going to sand it down with this 220 sandpaper. And then take a damp rag and just wipe it all off. Make sure that there's no residue left on the top. The fabric that we're going to decoupage is this scarf that I found at the thrift store for $5.99. It was in the 75% off bin, and I love the pattern. The pink on the end table matched perfect with the scarf. When you're going to decoupage on top of a surface, you want to make sure you're painting underneath a lighter color. If not, it will show through on your piece of fabric and it will not look as nice. So having that light pink underneath will look really nice when we decoupage the scarf on top. Now we're going to be using a polyacrylic sealer to decoupage. You can use Mod Podge, you can use homemade Mod Podge, but I find using the polyacrylic, it's thinner and it just lays better into the material, trying to get a nice smooth surface. You also want to make sure when you're picking a fabric, you're not picking something that's really thick. A nice thin cotton or like a scarf or something that will be able to soak up that polyacrylic really well will work perfect when you're trying to fabric decoupage. You want to make sure you're putting on a liberal amount of the polyacrylic sealer. When you lay that fabric into that, you want it to soak right through into the top. Now, I put a pair of gloves on, so when we get this exactly where we want it, now I've cut this piece of fabric just a little bit bigger than the top of the surface. You don't want to cut it right to size. You want the fabric to lay over the edge a little bit, and then I'm just going to smooth it out and make sure there's no bubbles and wrinkles right out to the edge. You'll know you've put enough polyacrylic sealer on if it's soaked right through the material. You want to make sure you have spread enough on the base coat that it's going to be able to come right up through the fabric. So that's what I mean by picking a fabric that's going to be absorbent and be able to take on all that polyacrylic sealer. If you're using something too thick, it will not be able to soak through. We've got all the bubbles and wrinkles out of that piece of material, and now before it dries, we're going to put a coat of the polyacrylic right on top of that fabric, making sure that we're spreading that polyacrylic right out to the edge. You want to make sure you have the polyacrylic right to the edge, even over a little bit, so it makes it easier when we're ready to take away that extra fabric. You can see how nice this water-based polyacrylic sealer spreads. I find with the Mod Podge, it's just a bit too thick to get it to spread really nice, where this will give you a nice, smooth, even coat. And next time you're at the thrift store, make sure you go over to the scrap fabric section or the bed sheet section, and you'll see all of the wonderful fabric that you can choose from to do this technique with. And what I like to do is when I find a piece of fabric, I'll take the fabric to the paint store, to Home Depot or to Lowe's, and I'll match a paint color that I love out of the fabric and just buy a little tester size, or depending on how big your project is, and match it all together. I was lucky this pink that I had left over matched this fabric perfect. We've got the first coat completely covering the whole top and then spread out to the edges a little bit. I put it outside in the sun and I let it dry completely. And now that it's dry, I'm going back with that 220 grit sandpaper and I'm just lightly sanding the top. And you'll see as you're sanding it, it's going to go really smooth. You'll see if there was any little rough kind of bubbles in it, this will take it right down smooth. I got it all sanded down and then I wiped off any little dust or debris, and now I'm putting on a second coat and again making sure that I'm spreading it right out to the edges. Now I think this end table needs some legs. I had these table legs in my stash, but I don't like the varnish that's on them, so I'm going to sand them right down and then attach them to the little end table. This is them all sanded down. I put some polyacrylic sealer on them. They're going to look great. I repeated this process 3 times, letting it completely dry in between each coat, and now we're ready to cut off the extra material. I'm going to cut a slit into each corner, and then we're going to get a really sharp X-Acto knife. Make sure you have a new blade so we can cut through this fabric really easy. Now this is why it was so important to take that polyacrylic right out to the edge, because it's crisp and it's dry now, and when you run the knife along the edge of it, it'll cut it nice and clean and straight. Pull that knife right straight up and down along the edge of that table and just slowly cut along, and I love this. It looks so fantastic. It's nice and neat and tidy and crisp. And again, you can see why you want to pick a fabric that's not too thick so you can get a nice clean edge when you're all finished.
triple tie it so it stays. Right? And then you will just continue.
Now that we have all the material cut off, I'm going to take that 220 grit sandpaper again and give it one last sanding right out to the edge. If you have any little hairs of fabric that are left from cutting, this sandpaper will sand that all away. And we're going to then wipe it with a damp rag again and put on one last coat of the polyacrylic sealer, making sure that we're going right out to the edge. And that's how easy it is to decoupage fabric onto your furniture. Once the top was completely dry, I went back and I distressed the whole cabinet. I wanted a little bit of that orange to peek through because there was some orange in that fabric, and I think it was a perfect idea because it all kind of made it look like it was meant to be together. And how cute is this? A little tropical kind of boho feel end table that I created from ugly looking table that I found on the side of the road. If you haven't tried this technique before, grab some fabric when you're out at the thrift store, and if you've got a little project you can try it on, give this a go with the polyacrylic sealer. I picked up this piece of fabric at the thrift store. It was $1.99. It's quite a bit of fabric, and it's cotton. You want to be using a fabric that's going to be able to absorb ink. Now you're also going to need some spray adhesive. You can get spray adhesive at any craft store. You can get it on Amazon. I'll put a link down below if you don't have any in your crafting stash to grab some. I'm cutting this fabric down to the size of a sheet of paper. And you want to make sure that you have your fabric nice and flat. So I always like to press it before I adhere it onto my piece of paper. I'm just using my iron on the highest setting with no steam and giving it a really good press to get all the wrinkles out of it. Now I've sprayed my piece of paper with the spray adhesive. Make sure you're doing it in a really well ventilated area. I actually take it outside, spray it, and then bring it back inside. And I'm going to trim all around the edges. You want to make sure you have it trimmed really well because we're going to be putting this through our printer and we don't want any bits of fabric getting caught as it goes through. Now when I'm doing these DIY projects, I have printers that are just in my craft room that's all I use it for. So I never have any problems if something happens when I'm trying to do some wild stuff on my printer that I haven't wrapped a good office printer. That being said, I've never had any issues. So we're going to load our paper into the printer, making sure that we're loading it so we print on that fabric side. This is my laser jet printer, but this will also work well for auto inkjet, and I'll show you next project using the inkjet printer. And this is a pattern that I printed on this fabric. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now I'm going to take my cutter and I'm just going to cut it in strips of ribbon. I'm leaving the fabric still on that paper. It makes it much easier to cut into strips. You don't want to peel that fabric off yet. And you can do any width of ribbon that you like. I think this one I did for 1 inch. And then you just peel the paper away and you're left with a custom ribbon. This pattern is available in my Etsy store. If you want to check it out, you can grab it and you can make some of this ribbon yourself. So here we have all this beautiful ribbon ready to use on our DIY projects. I like taking my little Cricut tool and fraying the edges a little bit. Just kind of gives it that rustic feel. I always kind of love making everything look a little bit aged and rustic, and just peeling away a couple of those threads off the sides and the ends. So now with this sheet, I did the exact same process. Put the spray adhesive on a piece of paper, fabric on it. But this one I ran through my colored inkjet printer. My laserjet printer only prints on black ink, so I wanted to add some color. So this is on my inkjet printer. Now you have to remember that none of this is going to be washable. And if you don't want to cut these into ribbons, you can print off this sheet of fabric and incorporate that into a DIY project. Also, put a quote on it. So many possibilities. Now I'm going to cut this one into strips. Also, you can also use these if you do junk journaling, scrapbooking, mixed media. You can dresser too, because I love the way they have that line across the drawers. I don't think it would have looked as nice if I hadn't just put a knot on it. Now on to our 6th project. I am so fortunate that we have people throw out fantastic stuff in our dump, because can you believe I found this lamp in the dump? The base is so ornate, it's wood, it looks like it's hand carved, but I wanted to put a funky spin on the lampshade. I picked up this bed sheet at our local Value Village, and it actually, the yellow in it, I think matches my craft room dresser. So I am going to decoupage the fabric onto the lampshade. This is an old vintage bed sheet, probably from the 70s, and I'm just cutting it into panels to make it easier to decoupage onto the lampshade. Lampshades are so expensive to buy, so this was definitely worth upcycling this one. I'm using my Mod Podge mat, and I'm just going to decoupage right into those pleats. I'm doing it in sections because I think that's a lot easier to manage. It did take a lot of Mod Podge to do this, but it was so worth it. And I love how that pattern in that bed sheet kind of shows up really well in the pleats of that shade. And I'm just, as I go along, pushing Mod Podge into the pleats on the lampshade, and then pushing the Mod Podge on top of the fabric to seal it all in really well. I also tried to make sure that I lined up the panels so the pattern was consistent over the whole lampshade. When I had it all finished, I just pushed in the little ends into those pleats to give it a really nice finished look. Now to add a funky, fun twist to this lampshade, I found this pom-pom trim at Value Village quite a while ago, tucked it away, didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I added it along the top of the edge, and I think it looks so cute. I love it in my craft room. I can't believe somebody threw this out, but their loss is my gain. Now on to the 7th project. Friends of ours had this bench loaded into the back of their truck that they were taking to the dump. I saw it, I asked if I could have it, took it out of the back of their truck, and proceeded to upcycle it. And did you notice the color of it? Again, I am drawn to that yellow, primitive yellow color. I am just loving it. I did not want to do anything to this bench other than just preserve it the way that it is. I took some TSP and I gave it a really good scrub to get all of the grease and grime and little bits of paint that were flaking off cleaned up. And I took a scraper just to lift off any bits of that paint that might be kind of peeling off so we can have a nice, clean, smooth surface. The spindle legs on this bench are fantastic. I just love it. Now I took a scour pad. This is a really, really light scour pad, and I just went over the whole bench so I could smooth it all out before I went on to the next step. I mixed up a batch of my homemade colored stain. This is really easy to make. I'll put the link below in the description for my tutorial on how to make it. And I just think it makes that yellow pop, and it just gives that raw wood a little bit of depth before I seal it up. I didn't want to paint over this bench because the chippiness of it is just gorgeous, and I didn't want to get rid of any of that. I'm going to put a couple of really nice graphics on the front of this bench because I'm going to put this out on my patio, and I thought it would look really cute with sit, enjoy, relax. I'm going to apply these graphics using my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. Now this is sat, and I'm just taking a damp rag until you can start to see the graphics show through, and then rubbing off all of the paper, and then you're left with fantastic graphics. This technique takes a little bit of practice, but once you get the hang of it, it is so fantastic, and I love the way that it turned out. I sealed this all up with my outdoor polyacrylic sealer in gloss. I wanted to have a really nice glossy finish on this bench. As soon as I applied that polyacrylic, that yellow just popped. This fit in perfect on my patio. Whenever I find chippy, rustic wood like this, I never want to paint over it. I always want to preserve it and seal it up and leave it just as it is. I hope you have enjoyed today's upcycle projects, and what makes them even better is they all came from the dump and they were all free. I love taking something old and discarded and turning it into something beautiful and pretty again.
To be
And I
continued.
hope I've inspired you to do the same. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next
Bye-bye.
video.